Hello, and welcome to Beyond. I am your host, Tiffany Hopkins, and I am here to talk about things related to mediumship. And today, I'm going to focus on mediumship as a process. Before I get into it, just want to remind everybody this is a Lilydale radio show, a production of Normalized Talking to the Dead, and available wherever you listen to or watch podcasts. So, depending on where you're actually receiving this right now, you can also find it on Lilydale's YouTube, Normalized Talking to the Dead's YouTube, which I just got set up, and I'm going to have a lot of more content on there soon, and on Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. So, I hope you are listening to this from a platform that is comfortable for you. And you know that we do episodes twice every month. So one episode a month is an interview. This month I had an interview with Joanna Ebenstein about her new book, Memento Mori, and we talked about the afterlife. And then the second episode in the month is just me monologuing about something I think is interesting and I hope is interesting to all of you. Most of it is usually based on conversations I'm having with other humans. So I've, kicked the tires a bit on our topics. And this year, because I have a book coming out in June, I am focusing on the content that is in the books and giving you an understanding of what's in there. So hopefully you will want to buy it and read it and then, do some mediumship yourself. So I realized that most of our episodes this season, which started in, I can't remember, December or October or something, have been conceptual. And we've talked about, and at least in the episodes with just me, we've talked about vocabulary and a constellation of skills that you need for mediumship and coming up with kind of an intellectual way of thinking about mediumship. And I haven't talked much about how to actually sit down and do some talking to the dead. So that's what we're going to do today, is talk about talking to the dead. That's fun, right? And I want to talk about it from my own fairly unique perspective in somebody who has a day job that is about, amongst other things, recognizing patterns and making processes. So in my day job in the tech industry, when somebody is doing something repeatedly in their job, often we come up with a process. This is particularly the case when the thing that is being done is done with others, and everybody needs to kind of get on the same page as far as how it is done. And so creating frameworks and documentation and processes is like something that's a big part of my day-to-day. And my brain has sort of been trained to think in terms of what's similar between this action and maybe another action, or this action over time, and what I do and what they do, and just trying to come up with patterns. And then being able to explain what it is that's happening. I usually come in to an organization and I set up things in the beginning. So I kind of initiate, and then I need to be able to communicate what I did to others. And this has been very helpful with mediumship because I've found there's a real lack of documentation about like what is actually happening for people inside their brains as they're doing mediumship. And I've talked to a lot of friends and who are amazing mediums, and not everybody is totally sure what's going on. And that's really natural because we're talking about something that is not, making cars on a factory line or developing software. It's a little closer to art, right? It's expressive, it is communication, and it is really personal. And we don't always know what's going on. Like, how much do we know what's going on when we talk to another person? And how much of that is just us being and interacting with the world around us? And so I don't think it's it's particularly normal way of thinking about mediumship that I'm bringing to the table here, which is one of the reasons I really like sharing it. But for me, I'm constantly thinking about, how is this working? What am I doing? What did I do last time? What am I going to do this time? How am I going to experiment? How am I going to change it? How am I going to make it work for me? How am I going to make it reliable so that I can do it again and so I can tell other people what it is I'm doing? And so I've spent a lot of time thinking about it, then doing it, and then thinking about it, and then talking about it, and then thinking about it. And one of the results of that is a very short, simple 7-step process that I use to explain what's happening in mediumship. And I'm going to walk you through those 7 steps and give you a chance to think about them and maybe try them. That would be great. I have other podcast episodes with meditations and journeys through trying these out. And if I have time, I will add one. And either way, there will be a bunch of meditations that I'm creating for the book that are published in the book, and I'm going to create videos for, and that's why I made the YouTube. And I'll put them all up there, and they walk through these steps. So even if you don't have the book, you will have access to this podcast with the delineation of the steps and then some YouTube videos to kind of guide you through experimenting with them. And then, of course, it's up to you to experiment with them on your own or find a circle to practice in with other people. And I want to say the thing about frameworks or processes is they're sort of meant to be guidelines or maybe even an average. Like they're not meant to be exactly followed to the T every single time. They're meant to make a process or make an activity more manageable and more clear, and make it feel like you can break it down into individual pieces, figure out what you need for your situation, and then adapt them for that situation. So while I'm giving you this process, if you already do mediumship, think about how it aligns with your own process, what you do that isn't in this, or what this makes explicit that maybe you didn't think about or didn't realize or don't do. And yeah, so I'm not saying this because everybody needs to do a 7-step process, or that you even will do a 7-step process once you get comfortable. But for me, when I got started, it really helped me to have a series of steps kind of in my head that I knew I was going to follow, so that I knew what to do next as I was kind of going through the process. When you're really in it, it's a lot more fluid than 7-step process. But again, this is also meant to make explicit things that are often extremely natural in our experience. And so there's also something kind of weird about talking about it as a 7-step process, because it's just a thing you do. Like you could also say that this same 7-step process is what you do when you communicate with a living person. And if you did that, you would, if you thought that way, you'd see that we're articulating something that is implied most of the time. And because we're moving this to the context of speaking to the dead, I think it's helpful to make it explicit, and then, throw it all out and just see what happens, right? So with that, I also want to say that this often, this is a process for working alone. If you're working in a group, there was a podcast episode, I think one of the first in the season, about circles and how this sits within the format that you use when you're working with other living humans. And then I'm also going to use the context of working as an individual with one sitter and working with a spirit. And that contact point, that whatever it is you're communicating with that is not in your visual, physical locale, that could really be anything else that you are working with. So remember that. And this doesn't necessarily have to have a sitter. That's sort of an extra dimension, which I'll bring into this conversation, but know that you can do this by yourself to have your own conversations with spirit or whatever your contacts are. So I'm just going to kind of tell you the steps first, and then we'll go through all of them one by one. So what I usually do is I start by quieting. So I spend a few moments, sometimes more, sometimes less, really connecting in with my body. And I just said I was just going to read them and not go into detail. It's so hard not to, but okay, let me give you all 7 and then I'll go back. So we quiet, we connect. I'm going to spend some time on this because this is the one that really got me in the beginning of like, what do you mean connect, right? What do you mean there? That's, we're going to talk a lot about that. Number 3, ask. So you got to say something. Number 4, receive. Hoping to get something back. 5 is translate. And so this is about doing something with what you're receiving back. In most cases, that's speaking, it could be writing, and many other things. 6 is you repeat, you go back to ask. You might even go back to connect if you need to. And then you go through them all again. And then number 7 is close. You got to end. It's important. So quiet, connect, ask, receive, translate, repeat, and close. So now let's talk about these one by one. And start with quiet. So I will have to go through these very quickly. When I did the class with Morbid Anatomy on Mediumship for Creativity, each of these, almost all of them had their own week-long 2-hour class. So this will be pretty quick. And so I could go on and on, trust me. But really, quieting is about becoming present. And really what we're doing here is creating a space for information to come in and for us to change where we're getting information to getting information from spirit or whatever your contact is. So you got to quiet down a little bit and like get present. And that creates the space so that you can go to step 2, which is connect. So this is connecting in a bunch of ways. So it's a catch-all word. We want to confirm that our being, our mind, body, spirit, are all ready for this and appropriate and in the right, mindset, body set. It's not a thing. The right, vibe. I know there's probably some technical terms here, and actually there's a chapter in the book about safety, and this would go into there's a lot to talk about, is how to decide, should I be doing this right now? And we're connecting with our, mind, body, spirit, heart, and like checking, is this the right thing for me to do at this time? Do I feel like I want to? And this is an important step because we're asking a lot of ourselves to do this work. It's unusual and it takes us out of our present environment. And so it's important to just check in before we do it. And we also want to connect with our environment, our physical space. Do we feel safe? Are we in a quiet place? Will we not be disturbed? And these are all, again, might be totally implied, but I'm just, again, making these excruciatingly explicit so that those who have never done it once would have, some ideas of how to get started. So we check in with our environment, check in with ourselves. And then if you have a sitter, if there's another living human with you, you check in with them and get verbal consent to do a reading. I think it's great to get verbal consent from your environment and from yourself. It doesn't necessarily have to be out loud, but checking in and saying, can I do this work right now? And then when I say connect, so once we've gotten some sort of approval and consent from our space, ourselves, and a sitter, if applicable, then when I say connect, I really mean to move attention to. And so when we are checking with the environment, we're moving our attention to the space around ourselves, to our environment, and noticing what's there. We're moving our attention to our body, into our heart, checking with our minds, checking with our spirit, That's how we do this confirmation, is we're attending to us, to ourselves, to our space, to our sitter. We have a nice, easy way to do that of just with words with another person, right? That's why mediumship is so much work, is because all of it's easy if you can just say, hey, you ready? And we can't do that with our space. We can't do that with our bodies. We can't do that with people who are dead and have no physical body. So when I say connect, I'm really talking about moving attention to. And lastly, we move our attention to our contact point and to our contact. And when we make contact, we want to confirm consent. We get into ask. That's step 3. We want to confirm consent with the contact and share our intention. What are we doing here? Why are we here? What are we up to? And we ask, hey, contact, hey, spirit, or spirit realm. If you're not looking for a specific spirit, maybe you're just connecting in with the spirit realm, want to see who's there. You ready? It can be pretty simple. It can be extremely poetic. It can be a prayer. It can be, something really that feels like an invocation, or, something special. Or it can be very simple, like, are you ready? It really depends on how you're feeling and what you're working on. And then when you're asking, once you've gotten consent from your contact, or if you're in a contact point, like you've just moved your attention to the spirit realm and you're just waiting to see if anything's there, you can start asking and engaging in a dialogue. And this turns into a bit of an interview. So, if you've got a specific spirit there, you are asking, both, can you give me more about yourself? Can you show me more? Can you tell me? Can you speak in words? Could you give me bodily sensations? Like asking for the kind of information you need, and then asking questions like, engaging and creating rapport, saying, how are you? Who are you? Can you tell me about yourself? And if you have a sitter, what kind of information do you want me to share with this sitter? How are you related to the sitter? How do you know them? Can you give me information? And that's where you're really engaging in what we think of as mediumship, of this interview with a spirit. And we can ask and ask and ask, but we have to stop at some point and get to step 4, which is receive. And so this is when we get something back from them. And this is the point that's, like, to me, most exciting. Everything else is directed by me. And when we receive, we have to wait until we get something back from our contact. And there are some nuances here that I want to explain. Oh, my phone is on silent, so not sure how that happened. But yeah, sorry about that. Message from spirit incoming. And the nuance in receiving, sorry, I just think that's really funny that I'm receiving a call right now. And it's like, oh, somebody else is reaching out. I didn't do anything. I wasn't expecting it. It just comes. And that's the, like, exciting moment with mediumship is, will something come that we are not directing or controlling? And sometimes it can take a lot of practice before it feels like we're really getting something that isn't coming from ourselves. And one way that I work with this is, well, I should say I do think there are 2 kinds of people. And some people are receiving stuff all the time and need to turn it off. And some people don't get much and need to turn it on. And I'm a person that had to learn to turn it on when it comes to mediumship. I didn't think I was getting information from spirit all the time. I'll talk about that more in another podcast, because in some ways I think I actually was, but I thought it was me thinking, because it just comes in and it feels like brain talk. Um, but really for me in mediumship, I needed to learn to turn it on because I didn't feel like was receiving things from outside of myself. And the way that I learned to turn it on and to be able to receive um, was through my body. And so when I ask, so I say, I think it feels like there's a contact there. Maybe it's my grandmother and I'm hoping to speak with her. Then when I've asked a question, then I wait and I make a physical and temporal space for something to come through. And for me, it doesn't come through in words all the time. Sometimes it does. It doesn't even come in pictures all the time. A lot of times it comes in physical sensations. And in this way, this moment in mediumship to me is a lot like a divination, because in a divination, you basically create a container. And then whatever the tool is, whatever the answer you get is the answer to the question you've asked. And this is the same thing with mediumship. In this moment, in step 4 of receiving, I have done this work to connect. I've done this work to ask what it is I'm hoping to talk about. And then when I quiet in that process and wait to receive something back, whatever it is that happens in my mind or body, I assume is from my contact, right? And so this could feel like how we always imagine it, like there's just a conversation and just a voice that comes through. But often it really isn't. It's more of a set of sensations that for me are tied to different emotions. Sometimes a little image of a memory will pop up, something like a song, article of clothing, like something is going to pop into my mind and in my body. And between those two, it will give me um, the response from my contact. And this part is very hard to explain, and it really is about trying it yourself. And it also is much more, it's also kind of weird to talk about because when you're doing it, it's much simpler and more straightforward than all these words. And something I want to say is when you're trying this, if you're receiving too much, you can ask and say, hey, slow it down, or I'd like a little less, or I only want to talk to one contact at a time. And, ask for what you need. And then if you're not receiving enough, start being more and more open to information coming through in ways that maybe you didn't think were information. Notice the feelings in your body, your own emotions. Even if you're feeling frustrated, that could be part of what is coming through from your contact, and expand your idea of what it means to receive and what it could be that you're receiving. And then, I could definitely go on about this more. And if, I'm going to start doing classes again in the spring, or I guess today is spring, in the late spring, early summer. And, doing this stuff in a group, I think is really helpful. Listening to like a lecture format about it is going to help you conceptualize what it is, but you got to just do it. So once you start receiving something, then it goes to step 5 to translate. And what this really is just getting it out. And I think this is a really hard step if you're working by yourself. Sometimes I try to keep pieces of paper. I'll use voice memos. I don't really speak out loud on my own. But if there's a sitter, that's the point where you start saying what you're experiencing out loud. And I put this in the middle, basically, of the process because you don't want to wait. You don't want to spend too much time asking and receiving before you say something out loud. This is particularly true if you have a sitter because you want to get their input and make sure what's happening makes sense to them and is useful to them. But if you're on your own, you can stay in it and wait to translate or get it out until you're done. Especially if you're working with this in a for creative purposes, there are really two options. You can just experience the connection and the conversation, and then close, and um, then get it all out, write it down, draw it. Again, record a voice memo, tell someone about it, whatever you want to do. Or you can actually have a pen and do like a kind of automatic or connected writing or drawing while you're receiving. So this can be a really fun activity, is just to write everything you're experiencing throughout the process from both sides, your own questions and their questions, and their answers, or draw, or move away from words entirely and just allow your body to receive, and then write or draw or paint or whatever it is, play in an instrument, what it is you're receiving. And so that translation process can happen kind of in between the asking and receiving. It can occur while you're receiving. You can directly receive and then like play it on the piano or however you want to express it. Directly write it, or it can wait till the end. So there's a lot of options there, depending again on what you're trying to do. And experimenting with this is especially fun with creative projects and different art forms. And it's also really fun with a person, where you're saying it out loud to a living human and getting their feedback, which is really fun and helps confirm what's happening and helps you learn what you are receiving internally, that it is useful, and it is, you know, potentially really coming from outside of yourself. And I think having a person in front of you to share, a living person, is especially helpful for that, learning your own process and experience. And so that's the repeat part. And then you close. And, closing might seem kind of trivial, but I think it's a really important act to uh, really take some energy to finish this process and disconnect. So the closing isn't just about like ending, but it's about disconnecting. So you want to thank and withdraw your attention from the contact, so disconnecting from them. You want to thank and withdraw your attention from the sitter. You want to thank and withdraw your attention from potentially the environment you're in. And then I always take a moment to make sure I am fully seated, all of my energy in my body, make sure nobody else's energy is in me, whether it's my contact or anybody else, just pushing that energy out and clearing myself, my physical body, my spiritual sense, and my energetic bodies to be just me. And take a moment to thank myself and thank me for doing this work and keeping my attention on this process and exploring and doing something a little different. And so that's it. That's mediumship in a framework. um I really wish that there was a way for me to get live questions, and in classes we do a lot of conversation, and I'll start posting and sharing those as they're live. I do look at the comments on here, so if you have questions or comments, please write them and I'll respond. And I hope you enjoy experimenting with this. And just for to make it easy for everybody, I'll just repeat the steps one more time. So we start with quieting, then we connect, we ask, we receive, we translate, maybe repeat in there a bit, and then we close and disconnect. So mediumship in a nutshell. Doesn't it sound easy? I really hope you enjoy trying this out. I'm curious to hear other people's processes and how you adapt these. I hope you yeah, find this helpful, and if not, just whatever, move on. It's okay. It's not for everybody. And I would just want to say, if you already have a process, may or may not be helpful hearing another person's process. So don't worry if that, if it all kind of scrambles what you're doing, also don't worry about it. I remember in fellowships in the mediumship school I was in, one in particular, we had a lot of mediums come and teach us, and they would explain their processes. And I remember one in particular, I tried to do it and it just messed up my process, and it took me weeks to be able to do it again because I was trying to use his process and it just wasn't working for me. But it did help me expand because I found I could go back to what I was doing before and it still worked. And I was like, oh, thank God. Because when you first start with this stuff, you're always like, is it gonna work? Like, what's gonna happen? And so again, one of the reasons I came up with a process like this, so that I had something really concrete to kind of fall back on. And so, don't be afraid to integrate parts, to throw parts out, to do whatever it is, and enjoy. Basically, do some mediumship. That's what I really want, is more people doing this. And yeah, so leave a comment if you have questions or thoughts. I will post some of my classes and circles once I get those going again. Those will probably be around June, after the book comes out. And last episode, Joanna and I talked about our big tour we're doing in Lilydale. I'll post the link here again because anybody who is interested in coming to visit, we have rented out the Leo Lynn Hotel, and I have a bunch of events planned for people who are joining the weekend of June 26th through 29th. And so it's going to be very fun. It'll be a great opportunity for you to get to know Lilydale and kind of get the inside scoop from me. And other than that, the season will start the weekend before that, so late June. There's tons going on, and I hope to see many of you here. All right, thanks for listening, and see you on the April 11th. Oh my gosh.